I remember the lighting first. Soft amber lamps. Artificial cobwebs stretched carefully across the ceiling fan, a curated kind of chaos, the kind you plan weeks in advance and pretend is spontaneous. My mother loved hosting Halloween. She liked the illusion of looseness. Masks gave her permission to perform warmth. I arrived as myself, no costume, just a black dress and restraint. Everyone there was well into their 30s and 40s, friends from her office, distant relatives, neighbors who admired her. She introduced me the way she always did. "This is my daughter," she said lightly. The stubborn one. Laughter, not cruel, not kind either. The kind that floats just above discomfort. I smiled because that is what I had been trained to do. For most of the evening, I kept to the edges, refilling drinks, complimenting decorations, answering questions about my work. My mother interrupted twice to correct minor details, where I lived, how long I'd been at my job, whether I was finally being practical. It wasn't new, it was ritual, but something was different that night. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I had reached a limit I didn't know existed. Near the cake table, someone asked her what the best gift she'd ever received was. A harmless question. She laughed too loudly. "Honestly," she said, glancing at me. "Peace and quiet. I used to joke that I wished she'd never been born. Life would have been simpler." The room reacted the way rooms do when people aren't sure if something is a joke. A few chuckles, a few glances at me. She didn't stop. You have no idea how difficult she was. Sometimes I think, God, I wish I could go back and undo it. Undo it. The word hung. This time the laughter didn't come. My body didn't flood with heat. I didn't feel tears. I felt something colder, cleaner, like glass settling into place. I thought about every private apology I had made for existing, every attempt to win approval, every time I had minimized myself to keep her comfortable. And I realized something quietly devastating. She wasn't speaking from anger, she meant it. I stepped closer, not dramatically, just enough so she didn't have to raise her voice. "Consider your wish granted," I said. My tone surprised even me. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't trembling, it was even. "I'm not your daughter anymore." No one gasped. Real life rarely does that. But the silence thickened. Conversations in the kitchen stopped. Someone set down a glass. My mother blinked, then smiled tightly. "Oh, please," she said. "Don't be dramatic." I shook my head. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being literal." For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking her to reconsider. I wasn't asking her to see me. I was removing myself from the position of seeking. She tried to pivot. "Everyone relax. She's always been sensitive." And that might have worked. It usually did. Except this time, someone else spoke. It was Daniel, her department head. He had come dressed in a half-hearted vampire costume, his tie still visible beneath the cape. He was known for being diplomatic, careful. He wasn't smiling. "That wasn't a joke," he said evenly. "You said you wished your daughter was never born." The words, repeated without laughter, sounded different. My mother stiffened. "Oh, come on, Daniel, we're family, we tease." He didn't move. "There's teasing," he said. "And then there's humiliation." The word landed heavier than mine had. Humiliation. Now the room had shape. Lines were forming, not loudly, not dramatically, just subtly. People were no longer looking at me with pity. They were looking at her. She attempted a small laugh, but it cracked. "I think everyone's overreacting." No one agreed. An older neighbor, Mrs. Qureshi, who had known my mother for years, folded her arms. "There are some things," she said quietly, "you don't say about your own child, especially not in public. Authority doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wears social consequence." My mother thrived on admiration, on control, on the narrative that she was composed, loving, and viable. And in that moment, the narrative slipped. Not because I attacked her, because I stopped protecting her. I picked up my coat from the chair. She looked at me then, not with anger, but something closer to panic. "You're really going to storm out?" she asked. "I'm leaving," I said. "There's a difference." She lowered her voice. "Don't do this here." Here, that was the problem. She had done it here, publicly. And I realized something else. If I swallowed it again, it would never stop. "I'm not doing anything," I said. "You made your wish clear?" For a split second, I saw her calculate, apologize, double down, laugh it off. She chose pride. You're twisting my words. No, I said softly. I'm accepting them. Daniel stepped aside to let me pass. It was small, almost invisible, but it felt ceremonial. The room parted not for drama, but for finality. No one clapped. No one whispered. They just watched. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. I could still hear muffled conversation through the walls, but it sounded distant already. My hands shook once I reached the gate, not from fear, from grief. You don't walk away from a parent without cost. You walk away from hope, from imagined versions of them, from birthdays that might have softened, from apologies that might have come. But you also walk away from auditioning for love. That night, she texted once. You embarrassed me. I didn't respond. In the weeks that followed, relatives called. Some urged reconciliation, some avoided taking sides. A few admitted quietly that they had heard similar things from her over the years. What changed wasn't explosive, it was structural. She stopped mentioning me at work events. I stopped attending family gatherings. The silence became real instead of performative. Months later, I heard through a cousin that someone had referenced that Halloween incident at her office. Not cruelly, just as context. The story had become part of her image, not dramatic, not scandalous. Just telling. I don't hate her. That's the strange part. I feel something more complicated, an acceptance that she may never be capable of what I once wanted. Sometimes I replay the moment. I don't see myself as brave. I see myself as finished. Finished begging. Finished shrinking. When I said I wasn't her daughter anymore, I didn't mean biology, I meant obligation. I meant that love cannot be demanded while dignity is denied. There was no celebration, no triumphant music swelling behind me as I walked into the night, just quiet. But it was the first quiet that belonged to me, and that was enough.